Abandoned places continue to capture the imagination of urban explorers and curious people around the world. Decaying and rotting without anybody caring about them. Places that used to be very busy with a large number of people doing business in them were abandoned and left to zero occupants, with only the natural flora claiming for them. For various reasons places are abandoned, most of which were essential for survival. From villages to towns and cities around the world. Here are some of the creepiest abandoned cities. But before we jump into number 1, be sure that you have subscribed and hit the bell icon to keep yourself informed with amazing videos. With that said, let's jump into our incredible list. Hashima Island. Japan's Hashima Island rapidly developed during the underwater coal mining operation. But when the mine closed in 1974, the island's town was abandoned for 3 decades, and its concrete buildings, including apartments, a school and a movie theater, became ruins. Its deserted appearance began attracting curious visitors until a portion of the island was officially reopened to tourists in 2009. Cracow. The last inhabitants of the cliffside Italian town of Cracow abandoned the city in 1980, and it's been a ghost town ever since. When the town constructed its sewer and water systems, it compromised the ground under the already earthquake-prone hills, causing destructive landslides. The town is now a popular site for some movies. Pripyat. The small city of Pripyat was home to 49,000 residents until it was evacuated and abandoned following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986. The ghost town remains uninhabited and has been eerily overrun by nature, but it has been deemed safe to visit. A kindergarten class full of toys, an amusement park, a swimming pool and more are dilapidated and frozen in time, a monument to the destructive power of technology. Ordos Kingbashi. The world's largest ghost town. Located in Inner Mongolia, Ordos Kingbashi was built to be a modern city with state-of-the-art architecture, large stadiums, and gorgeous public spaces. The city achieved all that in just under 10 years, but it failed to attract people. It was built to house 300,000 people, but only 70,000 people moved into the city. Eventually, those people started to trickle out as well. The city stopped building and went bankrupt. Today, it is largely a ghost town, with most of the buildings completely empty. Ashgabat in Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is a former Soviet Union country with a leader that has been compared to North Korea's Kim Jong-un. President Saparmurat Niyazarov planned to create a golden era of Turkmenistan in 1991 with the building of Ashgabat. He did so by erecting buildings that broke records, like becoming the city with the most marble buildings in the world. In fact, the city, which is 4.5 million square meters, has 543 buildings made of the luxury material. The city also has the world's largest Ferris wheel. Today, the city is largely a ghost town because of the country's isolated culture, which Niyazarov implemented. Tiandicheng, a replica of Paris. Built as an enormous luxury housing development, Tiandicheng emulates the famous French City of Lights in everything from the period-correct architecture to the 300-foot-tall miniature Eiffel Tower. With the capacity for over 10,000 residents, the city has remained mostly abandoned, except for the employees of a nearby French-themed amusement park. Oradour-sur-Glane. Oradour-sur-Glane was a small farming village located in the German-occupied section of France during World War II. On June 10, 1944, the French village of Oradour-sur-Glane was destroyed by the Nazis' SS organization. Soldiers killed 642 individuals and left few survivors. Post-war, the village became symbolic of German crimes against civilians and was declared a memorial and museum. It remains preserved in its ruined state, and every year on June 10, a commemoration ceremony is held to mark the anniversary of the massacre. Kayaköy. Kayaköy in Turkey was formerly a bustling community with around 2,000 Greek residents. In 1923, the Greco-Turkish War forced the individuals out of their homes, and they fled to Greece in a population exchange with Turkey. An estimated 350 homes and 2 Greek Orthodox churches remain abandoned in the city. They sit empty and damaged from the weather. Agdam, the Erie city of was once a thriving city of 150,000 people. It was lost in 1993 during the Nagorno-Karabakh War. Though the city was never the setting of combat, it fell as victim to vandalism while occupied by Armenians. The buildings are gutted and empty, with only the graffiti-covered mosque remaining intact. Agdam residents have moved to other areas of Azerbaijan. North Brother Island. A brother to New York City, this island was uninhabited until 1885, when Riverside Hospital was moved there to isolate and treat smallpox patients. Eventually, the island was used to isolate those with other communicable diseases, and Mary Mallon, well known as Typhoid Mary, was confined there for over 20 years until her death. In 1943, the island began housing those with tuberculosis, and following World War II, it was used to house students of local colleges due to the post-war nationwide housing shortage. Today, North Brother Island is abandoned, and it is off-limits to the public. Most of the island's buildings are in danger of collapsing, and trees have grown up around the ruined buildings. Texola. Located along America's most famous Route 66. This town's population has plummeted to 1,935. If you're an American history buff, you might know Texola by its previous names, Texocla and Texoma, reflecting the change in state lines over the years. In 1930 there were 581 people living in Texola. But following a decline in cotton production, plus the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression, only 35 people live here now. Thames Town. China is a big fan of replica cities. In fact, Shanghai has 7 European-themed towns built to give wealthy residents a new place to call home. There's a Dutch-inspired, canal-lined neighborhood, a Paris replica complete with 300-foot Eiffel Tower, as we saw, and even a slice of Sweden-inspired churches and Nordic houses included. But the city of Thames Town, a British copycat just 40 minutes from downtown Shanghai. Here you'll find a scale replica of Christ Church, statues of Shakespeare and Winston Churchill, and even some familiar red telephone booths scattered here and there. As curiously cute as this mini-city sounds on paper, it ended up being a complete failure. In fact, all of the 7 experimental towns are now pretty much abandoned. Targa in Libya. 7 years ago, this town achieved ghost town status after its residents were displaced as a result of the 2011 Libyan civil war. While 40,000 people used to call Targa home, that number fell to the occupants of only 250 tents. This fishing village in the Shaanxi Islands of China has been abandoned for years. Hitawan may be the most verdant and stunningly green village the world has ever seen, as nearly every building is overgrown with ivy and other lush vegetation. This green gem, situated about 40 miles from Shanghai, was once an active settlement, inhabited by around 2,000 fishermen and their families. In the early 1990s, when the small bay became increasingly unable to meet the growing fish industry's needs, residents began migrating to the mainland in search of other employment and a better life. Slowly, nearly every house was abandoned, and only a handful of residents now remain. Over the past 2 decades, the forces of green took over, plastering nearly every surface of the settlement with dense overgrown foliage. Adding to the otherworldliness, a peek inside the deserted houses reveals decaying household items and pieces of furniture frozen exactly as they were placed years ago before the inhabitants left. This place is now open to tourists, and now the remaining residents in the place started to earn a coin from the tourist. The Kowloon Walled City. Located just outside Hong Kong, China. During British rule, a former watchpost to protect the area against pirates, it was occupied by Japan during World War II and subsequently taken over by squatters after Japan surrendered. Neither Britain nor China wanted responsibility for it, so it became its own lawless city. Its population flourished for decades, with residents building labyrinthine corridors above the street level, which was clogged with trash. The buildings grew so tall that sunlight couldn't reach the bottom levels, and the entire city had to be illuminated with fluorescent lights. It was a place where brothels, casinos, opium dens, cocaine parlors, food courts serving dog meat and secret factories ran unmolested by authorities. It was finally torn down in 1993 after a mutual decision was made by British and Chinese authorities, who had finally grown wary of the unsanitary, anarchic city and its out-of-control population. As always, thank you for watching, don't forget to subscribe. And to watch more videos by tapping the videos above.